In the year 750 AD, Damascus was still the beating heart of the Umayyad Caliphate. For nearly 90 years, its rulers governed an empire that stretched from the Atlantic Ocean to the borders of India. Roads, cities, libraries, and magnificent mosques stood as symbols of a civilization at its peak. But while the city slept beneath the first light of dawn, a storm was already moving across the east. The Abbasid Revolution was no longer a distant rebellion. It was an unstoppable force. Within weeks, one of history's greatest empires would fall, and from its ashes, a single survivor would change the destiny of the Islamic world forever. The year was 750 AD. The Umayyad Caliphate had fallen. Across Syria, Palestine, and Mesopotamia, Abbasid forces hunted every surviving member of the Umayyad family. Princes who had once lived in magnificent palaces now wandered as fugitives. Every road had become a trap. Every stranger could be a spy. Every sunrise might be their last. Among those fleeing was a young prince, Abd al-Rahman ibn Muawiyah. Barely in his 20s, he had already lost his home, his family, and almost his entire dynasty. But destiny had not finished with him. One final escape still awaited. Ahead lay a river that would separate life from death. Night had fallen. Behind them, the Abbasid horsemen were closing in. Before them flowed the mighty Euphrates. There was nowhere left to run. Abd al-Rahman stood at the riverbank, breathing heavily. Beside him was his younger brother, Yahya. Together they stepped into the freezing water. The current was powerful. Every stroke meant survival. Then, a voice echoed across the river. "Return. You are safe. No harm will come to you." Yahya hesitated. Abd al-Rahman shouted with all his strength, "Don't believe them. Keep swimming." But fear overcame hope. Yahya turned back. Abd al-Rahman watched helplessly as Abbasid soldiers seized his brother on the riverbank. Moments later, Yahya was killed. Abd al-Rahman never saw his brother again. Alone, he crossed the Euphrates, not as a prince, but as the last hope of a fallen dynasty. The Euphrates was behind him, but safety was still far away. Abd al-Rahman was no longer a prince. He was the most wanted man in the Islamic world. Abbasid agents searched every city, every caravan, every border crossing. Rewards were offered for his capture. Every sunrise brought new danger. Every stranger could be the one who betrayed him. Yet he refused to surrender. Guided only by hope, he crossed Palestine. He passed through Egypt and continued west, toward the vast lands of North Africa. The journey would last years. It would test his courage, his patience, and his faith. But beyond the endless deserts, destiny was waiting. 5 years had passed. 5 years of hiding. 5 years of exile. 5 years of survival. Abd al-Rahman had crossed deserts, rivers, and kingdoms. At last, he reached North Africa. But he had not come to surrender. He had come to prepare. Across the sea, in Al-Andalus, the Umayyad Empire was gone. Governors fought one another. Arab tribes competed for power. Berber factions demanded their place. The land was rich, but divided. Then, quiet whispers began to spread. A prince of the Umayyads is still alive. The blood of Damascus has survived. Secret messages crossed the sea. Loyal supporters reached out. They asked only one question: "Will you come?" Abd al-Rahman looked toward the western horizon. His answer was simple: "Prepare the ships." In the autumn of 755 AD, after years of exile, the shoreline finally appeared. Before him lay Al-Andalus, a land of fertile valleys, snow-capped mountains, great rivers, and magnificent cities. Yet beneath its beauty, it was deeply divided. Rival governors struggled for power. Tribal rivalries had weakened the province. Loyalty could be bought, and alliances changed overnight. Abd al-Rahman stepped onto the shore. He did not arrive with a great army. He did not wear a crown. He carried only one thing: a claim to a fallen dynasty and an unbreakable belief that history could begin again. Abd al-Rahman had reached Al-Andalus. But arriving was only the beginning. He possessed no palace, no treasury, no standing army, only his name and the memory of a fallen dynasty. Yet across Al-Andalus, there were still men who remembered the house of Umayyad. Former soldiers, tribal leaders, and loyal clients who had once served Damascus. One by one, they came in secret, by night, through forests, across rivers, along forgotten mountain paths. They risked everything, not for gold, not for power, but for the hope of restoring order to a divided land. Each new arrival strengthened the prince. Each oath brought him one step closer to reclaiming history. My friends, I did not cross deserts, escape rivers, or bury my family simply to survive. I came here because Al-Andalus deserves peace, not endless division. If we stand together, we will build a future that no enemy can destroy. Bring 756 AD. Abd al-Rahman's army was still small, but it was disciplined, motivated, and united by a single purpose. Across Al-Andalus, Yusuf al-Fihri gathered a much larger force. 4 years, he had ruled the province. Now, a fugitive prince had come to challenge his authority. There would be no negotiations, no second chances. Both armies marched toward the plains outside Córdoba. There, the future of Al-Andalus would be decided. Today, we fight not for revenge, but for justice, not for a throne, but for a future. Stand together, and history will remember this day. Before sunset, one army would be broken, and one man would become the ruler of Al-Andalus. Dawn broke over the plains outside Córdoba. Thousands of warriors stood facing one another. For Yusuf al-Fihri, this was a battle to preserve his rule. For Abd al-Rahman, it was the final chance to reclaim his family's legacy. There would be no retreat, no second opportunity, only victory or death. The battle raged for hours. Neither side gave ground. Then, Abd al-Rahman saw an opening. He committed his reserve. The attack struck with unexpected force. Yusuf's line began to break. Discipline turned into confusion. The battle was decided. On that day, Abd al-Rahman entered Córdoba, not as a refugee, but as its new ruler. From the ruins of one empire, a new Umayyad state was born. It would endure for generations. Victory at Almira was only the beginning. Abd al-Rahman now ruled Córdoba, but he did not yet rule Al-Andalus. Across the peninsula, powerful governors refused to submit. Tribal rivalries still divided the land. Every fortress, every province, every ambitious commander could become the next rebellion. The prince who had survived exile now faced an even greater challenge: to build a state that could survive him. A crown is easy to wear, but difficult to keep. Victory had made Abd al-Rahman the ruler of Córdoba. Yet across Al-Andalus, rebellions continued to erupt. Some governors refused allegiance. Others dreamed of replacing him. Even old allies could become dangerous rivals. Abd al-Rahman understood one truth: a divided nation cannot survive. Every rebellion had to end, not through cruelty, but through decisive leadership. Years passed. The fires of war slowly faded. Roads became safer. Markets flourished. Fields were cultivated once again. Córdoba had become the heart of a rising emirate. But Abd al-Rahman knew that kingdoms are remembered not only by their victories, but by what they leave behind. He envisioned a monument that would unite faith, learning, and civilization. In the year 785, construction began. The great mosque of Córdoba was born. He had crossed rivers, escaped armies, built a nation, and now he was building something greater than himself. A place that would inspire generations yet unborn. Nearly 3 decades had passed. The frightened refugee who crossed the Euphrates had become the undisputed ruler of Al-Andalus. Cities prospered. Roads were secure. Trade flourished. Learning spread. His enemies had expected him to disappear into history. Instead, he had written a new chapter of it. Across the Islamic world, his achievement could no longer be ignored. In exile, he had lost his homeland. But in Córdoba, he planted new roots. Later generations would remember him by a name that captured his remarkable journey, the Falcon of Quraysh. According to later historical accounts, the Abbasid Caliph al-Mansur is said to have praised Abd al-Rahman for rebuilding Umayyad power despite overwhelming odds. Whether every word of that account is exact, historians continue to discuss. But his achievement is beyond dispute. The years had passed quietly. The warrior who had crossed deserts, fought battles, and built a nation had grown old. His hair had turned silver, but his vision never faded. Córdoba was no longer a fragile frontier. It had become the capital of a powerful emirate. The refugee had fulfilled his destiny. Every stone, every road, every garden told the story of a man who refused to surrender. In the year 788 AD, Abd al-Rahman ibn Muawiyah passed away. He was not buried in Damascus, the city of his birth, but in Córdoba, the city he had transformed into his home. History remembers kings for the lands they conquered, but it remembers Abd al-Rahman for something greater. When an empire collapsed, he refused to let its civilization disappear. He carried its memory across deserts, across rivers, across an entire continent. And in doing so, he gave birth to a new chapter in the story of the Islamic world. His journey ended, but his legacy still stands.